Well, good day, everyone. Welcome once again to the Bible Beyond the Basics podcast. This is Bob and Jason joining you once again. We thank you once again for everyone who's been listening, who's been commenting, who's been interacting with us or with the show in whatever way. We appreciate all your feedback and support. Today is episode number 14, and today's episode is titled, How Can an Ass Talk? So, as I've been thinking about this, there's so many people, we've talked about this before. There's been so many Hollywood productions of all of these Bible stories, all of these Bible accounts. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about today hasn't really made it on screen. And you've got, like, with the Ten Commandments, you've got Charlton Heston and that role that he had that may or may not have been the most accurate. I was just thinking about that and just thinking, how do you cast an ass in Hollywood?
Well, actually, there's a lot of them.
You got a couple different options.
Right, yeah. You know, as they say, how can an ass talk? Well, how can you stop them from talking is my question.
How can you get an ass to shut up?
Well, which is really good, because just before this we're talking, and we're all kind of depressed because of the COVID and the variants and the frustrations with not being able to provide the pastoral care you want to do, and all the socialization and what is going on anymore, and the vaccinations versus unvaccinated. And okay, today it's going to be fun. Okay, we can use it. Now, next episode 15 is...
We'll make sure to bring you right back down.
Yeah, we're talking about genocide there. But so this is where we're kind of... The Bible is filled with all sorts of oddities. And from Numbers and Deuteronomy and Kings and Joshua, all that sort of stuff. And it's just weird.
Yeah.
One of the ones that I came across as we're backing our way into an ass, of which I am very familiar personally. I have a kindred relationship with donkeys. One of the ones that I came across was Og. And as you say, there's not many movies about Og.
Yeah. It'd be hard to create a summer blockbuster out of that.
And part of it is, forgive me because I'm going to take up a little bit of time here, because there was I got a bunch of collection. My mother knew him, my pastor knew him, David Steele, and he was a silly Presbyterian poet.
Sure.
And he wrote this little ditty about Og's bed. In fact, actually, I've used these a couple of times. One of my favorites is, and I use it on Christmas Eve. It's called "Please Touch," and because we had one of our creches is extremely precious and all that ceramic, and don't play with it. And he wrote a wonderful poem that actually, with creches and so, Jesus figures and donkey, that's exactly what you want to do, is have the kids touch it. So if you'll forgive me, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Og, and this is Deuteronomy 3 and the first 11 verses. On many occasions we've raised a dispute regarding the spiritual value of Numbers, Josh, and Dut, sections of which we find truly absurd, especially accounts of the folk who were massacred. In the conquest of this, that, or the other village, the amount or the plunder, extent of the pillage, these bloody statistics of each armed patrol are hardly the rations that nourish the soul. Yet I have developed a strange fascination with the tale of the war in the country of Bashan. In the passage describing the death of King Og, the author includes a unique epilogue. He describes in great detail the size of Og's bed. It measured 4 cubits by 9, so it said. His bed was 6 feet by 13 and 1/2. That is the gist of the king's epitaph. What caused that old scribe to consider it vital to pause in the midst of bloody recital of the raped and the wounded, the maimed and the dead, with the story of Og and his wonderful bed? I like to imagine the author was trying to make the passage more bedifying. We could use this today a little bit more.
There we go.
But Og's bed, But it does introduce us into some of the oddities that are filled throughout the Old Testament. And he's the giant king of Bashan, okay? And he's probably one of the last of the Rephaim, which comes from the Nephilim and all that sort of stuff from the early days. Remember when Joshua and Caleb were exploring Canaan, and they were afraid, "Ooh, my, there's giants there."
In the land.
And part of this is what a lot of scholars think is this little reference in 11. For Og, the king of Bashan, was left with the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. It is not in Rabbah of the Ammonites. Is it not there? 9 cubits with its length, and 4 cubits with its breadth, according to common cubits. So, in fact, I did have somebody say, what's a cubit? Well, a cubit is from elbow to finger. So basically...
If it's common cubits, isn't there an implication that there's uncommon cubits?
Of course.
Are there metric cubits?
Yeah, well, they didn't have rulers back then. They had arms. And so so mine is actually a little longer of a cubit. So my bed actually comes to about 16 foot by 6 foot. Okay, it's bigger than a king size bed. And so part of it is they're referring to it because he's the last, and it's probably sort of on display. But this is what is really kind of fun about the Bible. Is it's probably what they call a dolmen, and which is probably somebody came across an ancient primeval stone structure. Of the pillars holding up a flat surface. You kind of see it in Stonehenge and all the other Stonehenges around the world, lots in Scotland. And they tried to figure out, what is this? And so they appropriated it and kind of made it into something they wanted it to be. So that's a bed. And how we create.
And they tell the mythological stories that surround it, and that could have happened generations ago. The story carries on, then it gets adapted into the history that finally gets written down, and it's just so interesting to think about where some of this stuff could have come from.
And the creative imagination. Which is part of the fun. And these are not a scientific people. They don't really have a concept of time even. So again, it's what we referred to when the Renaissance painters were painting all those Jesus things. They didn't realize Jesus probably didn't wear Renaissance Italian clothing. Or had long blonde hair.
But it's interesting with archaeology and everything. We say that the further away we get from things, the further we're separated, the less knowledge we have of the past. But with archaeology, we're able to uncover things. We're able to study ancient societies and such. And the further along that we get, actually, the more knowledge that we have. And we're an advantage in many ways over, like, for example, when they were translating the King James Version, they only had a handful of texts that they were able to use. And now when we create a Bible translation, we've got a wide myriad of ancient texts which are available to us that have been uncovered. Older texts. And we're still going to discover some more down the road. What a lot of people don't realize is the translations are done by committee, and there's certain passages, and you can see in the bottom of, let's say, our Greek or our Hebrew text, where the committee actually votes, and they give it a grade. Well, this is an A. We really think this is the proper translation. Or this is a D. We're not really agreed what this means. And so it's a work in progress, folks, like us. So this Og thing is, and I had to look it up because that wonderful ability, we do it here. Van Wagner would take us up. Have you been to the Devil's Featherbed? I have not.
Oh, it's fun. It's the other side of Bald Top.
Okay.
And I forget what it's a glacier remnants of a lot of rocks. And it's called the Devil's Featherbed, and there's various devil's things around Pennsylvania where the rocks are, and it's all these jagged rocks, and it's the home for a lot of rattlesnakes. Okay, that's why Van loves taking kids up there. Say hi, Van. But we give them these names. There's a wonderful. If you look also in like parts of mountains, like Bald Top and other places, there's barren spots where there's these rock collections, and those empty spots on mountains where they're treeless are called the bear dance, because what happens is at night, all the bears come out and they dance, and they pound it all down. So those are the bear dance sections. And so if you go out in the middle of the night, be very quiet because you might catch all the bears dancing. See, we're so good at the Devil's Tower out in South Dakota, North Dakota. All these wonderful things. And I did these geoglyphs that were written and or created by nature or by man, and we try to figure out what they are. The wonderful one that is in Northern Ireland that is the Giant's Causeway. And what it is basalt, and I didn't realize this until I did some study. Basalt will erode into hexagonal shapes. Mm-hmm. And so there's this causeway that reaches out from Northern Ireland and it towards Scotland. And it's the Giant's Causeway because he built it in order to fight a giant over in Scotland.
Huh.
We create wonderful things.
Yeah, and that's the same sort of mythology that we find in Scripture. Mm-hmm. I think it's just evidence, as you're pointing out too, we do the same things today that were done back then, and we're just coming across some of that.
Yeah, I had to look it up because it's pareidolia is the ability to see images of faces in rock structures, like the Old Man of the Mountain or our Shikellamy. The profile of Shikellamy, and it's part of a form of apophenia, which is seeing connections in random things such as clouds or conspiracy theories.
Okay, so it goes from I see a rabbit in that cloud to, John F. Kennedy is still alive.
All these random. We want to bring connections. Into our understanding, because we have to be creative and imaginative, because the world eludes us. Can you imagine the first people stumbling across Stonehenge and going back? Or there's a part in Wales. I love Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, those old writings, and there's a part there in the Green Forest where it looks like the castle of the Green Knight.
Yeah,
and so these stories get created, the elves and the fairies and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, of course, Paul Bunyan created the Grand Canyon.
Of course.
Yeah, he dragged his axe. All these, I love the Cherokee stories of the one Cherokee story is why dolls that don't have faces. Because they're cornhusk dolls, and the one cornhusk doll escaped and was so pretty she looked at herself, and so the gods kind of said, "We got to stop this because you're meant for the children to play with you, not for you to admire yourself." Great truths. So, which takes us to how can an ass speak?
Right.
Okay. Hey, do your children have some favorite talking animals?
Yeah. We have various animals around the house which have produced the ability to speak. One of our favorites is Bacon.
Okay.
Bacon has actually made an appearance or two in church from time to time, but he's a rather large animal that we have who's been with us since before Lori and I were even married, and he's become good friends with most of the children. He has a very specific voice and such.
We do this. Walt Disney has done it for years. Felix Bag of Tricks. I'm a big fan of Rocky and Bullwinkle. Big surprise. And we create all these animals. Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah.
So, in fact, I made a list of all of them because I could try to work them into sermons. Beatrix Potter, A.A. Milne. Which are you? Are you Eeyore, or are you Rabbit, or are you Al?
Yeah.
or are you Pooh Bear, or Nervous Piglet? I love that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, which gets us to this Laurel and Hardy quality in Numbers. And it's Numbers 22, 21 to 30. And what we have is, see, Balaam lives in Mesopotamia, and he's a prophet for hire. Which shouldn't surprise us because, turn on the TV and you'll see a lot of prophets for hire. And what it is that the king, Balak of Moab, wants to hire Balaam to curse the Israelites. And he's paid a pretty good bit, and he says, okay, I'll go and see what God says to me, which is interesting that he's going to listen to God in the first place. But as he's traveling with his ass, an angel comes in the front, but Balaam doesn't see it, but the ass is smarter. And the ass doesn't want to go and curse the Israelites. And so we have this wonderful exchange, and finally the ass, the donkey, is given voice to tell Balaam what's going on.
Yeah. And it's an interesting story. In some ways, you think to yourself that could be showing us how even the smallest of creatures, or the creatures we don't expect, are the ones who God can use to convey God's message, God's will through.
Yeah, so it's bacon.
Yeah.
God can give voice, and here he is. But the funny thing is that it's kind of fun because Balaam eventually does go, but he can't curse the Israelites. Even he has to obey God, and then the ass takes him there. And it's this Laurel and Hardy exchange going on. It's a hysterical folktale.
Yeah.
And we have to understand it as such.
And it reminds me, like in the Disney stories, the like Frozen, which I've seen quite a few times with kids my age, with kids the age that I have. The horse will speak into the main character's ear.
Yeah.
And that they communicate in that way.
And we got to see little Eve and Isaac James the other week, and it was lovely. And actually, it was kind of, their world is so open. Our daughter and her husband and the two live in Alameda, California. And we're up in the Hudson Valley, and we were there 2 weeks ago over the weekend for her birthday, August 7th. And the day we left, there's a big rainstorm that comes through. Well, Eve, living in California, never really experienced a Pennsylvania rainstorm. And our daughter, bless her, gave us a video of Eve dancing in her jammies because they said, go out on the deck and just dance in the rain. She's never experienced, she's had an occasional California drizzle or dew.
Yeah.
That's it. And so she is just filled with joy and wonder and dancing in the puddles.
I was out in California a couple years ago, and there was a little bit of a rainstorm out there, and it was interesting to see. It seemed like everybody was panicking. He had no idea what was going on. So how do we understand our world? We create with our imagination all these tales and mythologies, because mythologies, I keep repeating, is not the same in English grammar as a fiction. Okay, myths are truths in saga story form. There's great depth of truth in them, and so we have to appreciate that. So there's great truth in this Laurel and Hardy exchange between Balaam and his ass and Balak and all this sort of stuff. And he ends up even a prophet for hire. Which, by the way, I'm always fascinated by the occult and seers and soothsayers because they're not really kindly treated throughout the Bible because they're not real prophets. But a friend of mine, when I had my sabbatical, I went around interviewing my old seminary softball team to see how they did after 30 years, 25 years of ministry. And one of them told me his story is how he finally ended up in seminary because he experimented with the occult and did a lot of those kind of pursuits in other religions and astrology and such.
And his great insight, courtesy of some nice blue-haired ladies who visited him after he once visited a Presbyterian church, who came up to his apartment with this long hair, and he was a college student.
Yeah.
And he realized all of that is designed to bend the world to my will. What is Wiccan but witchery and all that sort of stuff and superstition, but trying to create the world to do what we say. As opposed to what he realized, his freedom is found in doing what God says. And so the wonderful upshot of this folktale is that, who's the real ass? Who is smarter, the ass or the prophet for hire?
That's a good way to turn it on its head. There you go. If we don't listen to what God is saying to us, maybe we're the ass. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.